Hello again, this is Anthony, the creator of CleverGizmos.com and the software app Keyword Researcher. Around 2,500 years ago, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Now, I've been wanting to record this video for a while now because I've watched many website owners struggle with this first step. When you're starting a web business, your first step is usually buying the domain name, buying a new .com for your website. This is a notoriously tricky step. If you've ever gone through this process before, then you know how agonizing it can be. Lao Tzu was a contemplative guy, but I think even he would have experienced anxiety when buying his first domain name. It's a confusing process, and people are afraid to pick the wrong name. And their fear is somewhat warranted because brands are important. And when it comes to domain names, there are a lot of inconspicuous SEO, marketing, and psychological forces at play here. So in this video, I'm going to try to make that first step a little easier. If you've ever bought a domain name before, or if you're thinking about buying one, I'd encourage you to watch the next few minutes. So, okay, we all know about the importance of brand. One of my favorite examples of this is in the automotive industry. So let's say I offered to give you $1 million if you answered this question correctly. Which truck is more powerful, GMC or Chevy? Which truck would win in a race? Suppose you could only choose one. If you pause for a moment and think about it, you might notice that your mind is leaning towards one answer or the other. A lot of people think that one truck is at least a little bit more powerful than the other truck. But the truth is that GMC and Chevrolet are both owned by the same company, General Motors. And as far as torque and horsepower go, these trucks are exactly the same. So if you've ever wondered why all the cars on the road often look very similar, it's partly because they are very similar. They're identical in many cases. They're produced on the same assembly line. Sometimes the only thing on the car that's different is the logo, the branding. Look, here's the Mazda Tribute and the Ford Escape, the Mitsubishi Lancer EX and the Proton Inspira, the Mazda BT50 and the Ford Ranger. They're nearly equivalent. This is called badge engineering, and it describes the curious practice of marketing the same vehicle under multiple brand names. That's the power of brand. Just the mere existence of this phenomenon can teach us a lot about the power of brand, because we all carry around various emotional feelings, sometimes very strident feelings, about the millions of company names that fight for our attention each day. As you glance at these logos on your screen, do some introspection. You can probably feel yourself associating one emotion or another with them, often a positive or negative emotion. And such feelings often stick with us for decades, and they'll influence our buying behavior throughout our lives. So this is important stuff. A lot of newbies screw this step up, and that's unfortunate because this seemingly simple initial chore of choosing your domain name might actually have some far-reaching consequences when you get further down the path. So why do we want a good brand name? What will a good brand name do for us? Obviously, brands are important for a myriad of reasons, many of which we're all pretty much familiar with. You want your company name to be pleasant sounding, have a mellifluous tone to it, be easily memorable, and ultimately you'd like it to garner brand recognition. I think everyone pretty much understands that. That's one aspect of branding. But for us as website people, there are some other, more nuanced and technical reasons that describe the importance of brand. Recall in the previous videos when we talked about how Google processes billions of, quote, navigational searches each month. Over 3.7 billion people each month go to Google, type Facebook, and press enter. 1.3 billion people type YouTube and press enter. 414 million people type Gmail and press enter. 277 million people type Yahoo and press enter, etc., etc., etc. Often, the world's biggest search engine, Google, is not really a search engine at all. It's just a web app that matches a brand name to a domain name. You go to Google and you type in Facebook, and Google says, oh, you must be looking for the Facebook.com homepage. So that's the link that Google puts on top. You click on it and you're gone. This happens billions of times per month. Take a moment to appreciate how bizarre that is. Google.com processes over 4 billion queries each month, comprised solely of people trying to get to Facebook.com. And there are only 7 billion people on the entire planet. So I hope this helps to convey to you the importance of brand, the importance of choosing a good domain name. Additionally, I hope you can appreciate the kind of SEO signaling that this sort of behavior is broadcasting to Google. Recall our sample websites, puppyplace.com and doggyebooks.com. Puppyplace.com is owned by a licensed veterinarian who has devoted his life to the study of dogs. He's traveled the world lecturing about dog health. He's appeared on TV news shows to comment on dog training techniques, etc., etc. And the doggyebooks.com guy doesn't even like dogs, but he took a class on how to make money online, and he has filled his website with affiliate links to various dog products, and has purchased some dog-related site content which he hasn't even read. So, which guy is going to have more people actively seeking out his brand on Google? If you were Google and you had server logs showing thousands of people typing in Puppy Place each month, and only one person typing in Doggy eBooks each month, then what would you assume about puppyplace.com? Would you infer that Puppy Place probably had better information? Would you be more inclined to rank puppyplace.com over doggyebooks.com? I think so. And recall when we talked about return visitors. If you were Google and you saw that the same people continually came back to Puppy Place and nobody came back to Doggy eBooks, then what would you infer about Puppy Place? Wouldn't you think that Puppy Place was probably more trustworthy? So this is why brand is more important now than it ever has been, because Google can see all this brand-seeking behavior in their logs. They can see users typing brands into their search engine. Google knows which websites have devoted fans and which websites nobody cares about. In the past, people would locate brands with their eyes and ears. We still do, but there is a third component now. These days, people locate your brand by typing it, often by typing it into a search engine, into Google. They locate your company via keyboard. So not only is your brand name important for all the traditional reasons, but it's also a contributing factor to your website's SEO value as well. Okay, so now that we understand some reasons why choosing your brand, your domain name, is so important, let's try to understand the how. How do we get a good domain name? What does a good domain name look like? Well, to answer that question, let's look at a very bad domain name, like this one, tibuashaitila.com. So, who is tibuashaitila.com? What kind of company is this? Sounds like they might be located in Zimbabwe. But believe it or not, you're probably already quite familiar with this company. They're commonly known as Chiat, and they were run by the great advertising guru and friend of Steve Jobs, Lee Clow. They were even briefly mentioned in the 2013 Steve Jobs movie by Ashton Kutcher.
We're also going to double down on the advertising budget. Chiat will be the only advertising agency we use.
They're responsible for some very famous ads, including the famous iPod dancing silhouette commercials that you see here. So this is a very, very successful marketing company. But how did they get such a funny name? Well, to answer that question, we have to look at their history. Way back in 1962, New York-born copywriter Jay Chiat teamed up with advertising executive Guy Day to form a new agency called Chiat Day, styled as Chiat_Day. And in Paris in 1970, these four guys whose names I can't say, William Tragos, Claude Bonang, Uli Weisendinger, and Paulo Aldi formed an ad agency called TBWA Worldwide. The acronym TBWA is made up of the first letter of their surnames, TBWA. And then in 1995, TBWA merged with Chiat Day to become TBWA Chiat Day, confusingly written as TBWA_Chiat_Day. And finally, in August of 2012, some employee realized that they should get a website for their Los Angeles branch, and this resulted in what became, I think, the most absolutely hilarious and confusing domain name ever created, called tibuashaitila.com, or generally pronounced as tbwashaitdala.com. So on that day, this award-winning ad company with the world's most confusing name was now also the proud owners of the world's most confusing domain name as well. It's funny to think of their poor secretary answering phones in the office and trying to tell people how to get to their corporate website. You got a website? Yes, it's at tbwashaitdala.com. I'm pretty sure she got a lot of whats. By the way, I call this the telephone test. Before you buy a domain name, try to tell someone how to get to your website over the phone. If the other person just keeps saying what, then you might consider choosing a different domain name. Okay, so that was a brief history of the evolution of a very bizarre domain name, but Chiat Day had millions of dollars in contracts decades before the internet was even invented, and I'm sure they're making millions of dollars today. I doubt they even care about their domain name at this point. They're an old company. But imagine if one of the newer tech companies, like Uber, for example, had chosen a similar domain name. Let's consider our telephone test again. Just imagine stumbling outside a nightclub at 2 a.m. and your buddy says, "I'm calling Uber, man." That happens millions of times each night. The brand Uber is very successful and is already well ingrained in our lexicon, even though they're only a few years old. But suppose your friend said, "I'm calling TBWA Chiat Day LA, man." It's easy to imagine the negative marketing ramifications that would result from the adoption of such a domain name for that type of service. Nobody wants to hassle with a domain name like that. So with that said, let's go through a brief list of common domain name pitfalls to avoid. Okay, pitfall number 1, avoid acronyms. So as we just saw, the 4 founders of TBWA used the first letter of their surnames to create the acronym for their brand. Now, meaningless acronyms are not always a bad idea. Some acronyms sound better than others, like the furniture store, IKEA. IKEA was founded by then 17-year-old Ingvar Kamprad in 1943. He used the initials of his first and last name, IK. Elmtard is the name of his family's farm in Sweden, and Aguinard is the name of his hometown. So IKEA spells IKEA. IKEA.com is actually a great 4-character domain name. The word IKEA is quite easy to say and spell. There are millions of such examples out there. So nonsense words and nonsense acronyms are not always a bad idea, but just be wary of them. Notice in our TBWA-LA.com example, their domain is loaded with acronyms. TBWA for the founders' names and LA for Los Angeles. But all these letters really aren't adding anything other than confusion. So my hunch is in the future, Chiat Day will actually just drop these 2 acronyms. Most people already refer to them as just Chiat Day anyway, and I can see they own the domain name chiatday.com already. So I wouldn't be surprised if they drop their acronyms in the future. But in any case, I'm sure that even the people who work there are sick of typing TBWA and LA to get to their own website, which brings us to our next pitfall. Pitfall number 2, avoid long names. The domain name tbwa-chiatdayla.com has 18 characters. That's fairly long, though 18 characters is not too horrible. I've seen much worse. But typically, with domain names, you want to at least try to use as few characters as possible, simply because short names are easier to type, and you want to put as little irritation as possible between the user and your company. This is particularly true now that mobile devices are so prevalent. Just try typing tbwa-chiatdayla.com on an iPhone keyboard. tbwachiatdayla.com. It's a major pain in the ass to type that in. Alternatively, you can try asking Siri to do it, which brings us to our next mistake. Pitfall number 3, avoid words that don't spell as they sound. So here, I tried asking Siri to go to chiatday.com. And as we see here, Siri started navigating to shutday.com. Now, you can't really blame Siri for not knowing how to spell the word Chiat, because most humans don't know how to spell the word Chiat either. The word doesn't spell as it sounds. It sounds like shy-it, but it's spelled like chai-at. So be wary of using words in your domain name that don't spell as they sound. Now, pitfall number 4, avoid punctuation in all its forms. So again, let's take a look at the stylized fashion that Chiat Day uses to print their name, tbwa/chiat/day. Now, when they initially chose this rendering, adding such slashes probably didn't have any negative consequences. But today, as we all know, slashes are part of the language of computers. Slashes are interpreted as file folders, and they make the brand name confusing. This applies to most other punctuation marks as well, like the exclamation point in Bevmo. Exclamation points are not allowed in domain names, or the ampersand in Crate and Barrel. Ampersands aren't allowed either. Now, styling your brand with such punctuation is not the end of the world, but again, you're just creating yet another level of complexity for your potential customers to grapple with. You're forcing your clients to take an extra step and ignore all these extra characters. The slash, the exclamation point, and the ampersand. They're usually more trouble than they're worth for new companies. Bevmo was founded in 1994, Crate and Barrel was founded in 1962, and Chiat Day was founded in 1968. So it's probably not in their interest to change their branding at this point, but for new companies, be wary of using punctuation marks in your brand name. Now, mistake number 5, avoid non-A to Z characters. With computer programs, things get very weird very fast when you're dealing with international character sets. Consider the Australian company Rode Microphones, or the French makeup company L'Oreal. How easy is it for you to recreate these brand names on your iPhone keyboard? Not only can most keyboards not readily create these characters, but they can't be rendered in web URLs either. You'll notice on the respective Wikipedia pages, the company URLs have to be rendered with % encoding. So those are some ugly URLs. You can barely read them. And at the end of the day, again, both of these companies completely abandon their brand name styling anyway. All companies do, because domain names can't use these characters. Rode Microphones is located at plainoldrode.com. L'Oreal is located at plainoldloreal.com. Now again, these are very old companies, but for new companies, unless you're really set on doing business in a certain international region, I'd caution you from using such characters in your new brand name. Try to stick with the basic 26-character glyph-free A to Z alphabet. And number 6, avoid non-regional spelling. This is a problem that's particularly common with American companies. The owner will try to get cute with his brand name and elect to use international spelling for one or more words. For example, it's pretty common to see a company using the British or Canadian spelling of center, spelling it as centre. You can see thousands of examples of this on Yelp. Here's 3 right here. People think they're being avant-garde with these names, but they're mostly just adding unneeded confusion. So avoid that too. Okay, so those are 6 quick tips for choosing your domain name. Now, as a caveat, none of these rules are cast in stone. You could choose the worst name in the world and still make $1 million. Manufacturers are at play in determining business success. But hopefully this will give you a boost over that infamous first step in owning a web business, buying the domain name. So we just looked at a bunch of domain names that I don't like. Now let's look at some names I do like. Uber, for example, uber.com. Let's bring up a little checklist. So look, it's short, it has very few syllables, only 2, Uber. It's using the basic A through Z character set, which makes it very easy to type and very easy to Google. It spells like it sounds, it's easy to remember, and it reflects the company's spirit. Uber is an adopted German word that means better, larger, or most supreme. So that's perfect. This is an excellent domain name, particularly for this type of company, an app-driven ride-sharing company. Uber is a great name. There are plenty of other brands that share similar attributes. Twitter, Apple, eBay, Facebook. These are 2-syllable simple names. Moreover, notice that they're all .coms as well. Now, as anyone who has ever played the domain name game knows, you can spend hours and hours thinking of a super company name only to realize that the .com has already been registered. All of the 2-letter, 3-letter, and 4-letter .com domain names in the world have all already been registered, typically by domain name speculators. These are people who acquire domain names as an investment with the intent of selling them at a later date for profit, sometimes a huge profit. Uber had to pay $1 million for their 4-letter domain name. So that's one way to get your hands on one, but not everyone has $1 million to spend on a website. So I think this is the part where newbies start making the mistakes we talked about. They'll start adding strange characters to their company names, or they'll try to get cute with the spelling, or a lot of people do what Mark Zuckerberg did. They'll add a "the" to their domain name. Facebook used to be called thefacebook.com. This is their original homepage. You can see their original name here as well, and a very scary picture of then 20-year-old Mark Zuckerberg here on the top left. Now, fortunately, Facebook eventually bought the domain name without the in 2005 for $200,000. So one way to deal with the lack of remaining .com domain names is to simply pay a lot of money and buy one. That's one way to get a great .com, but fortunately, there are other ways to name your company. One trick that's becoming quite common is to use the .co country code. The .co domains were originally supposed to be designated for the Republic of Colombia in South America, but anyone can buy one. And because a .co kind of looks like a regular .com, this domain is pretty popular with American tech companies who don't want to spend a lot of money getting an actual .com name. The video sharing website Vine is a good example of this. Vine was developed in Florida, but they have a Colombian extension, vine.co. So perhaps the tech culture is moving away from the traditionally perceived necessity of owning a .com domain name, but personally, I still like .coms. I think, at least for now, it gives your website a certain legitimacy that the other domain extensions don't quite have yet. So if you still do want a .com, here's method 3. This is the one I recommend. Craft your brand name, your domain name, using 2 simple words that reflect the spirit or purpose of your company. Here's a perfect example, SoundCloud.com. SoundCloud is a very popular music website where you publish your songs, your sound, to their cloud, their servers, hence the domain SoundCloud.com. Easy to spell, basic A through Z characters, cool name, perfect. Here are some other examples. Digital Trends, Shutterstock, Network Solutions. Digital Trends is a technology news magazine. Shutterstock sells stock photography, and Network Solutions sells networking services. No word characters, easy to spell, perfect. I chose my own brand name in the same way back in 2012. I simply looked for 2 easy-to-spell words that described my apps. Here you can see some of my early name ideas and logo designs I was playing with in Photoshop. Eventually, I settled on Clever Gizmos. I bought clevergizmos.com. I make gizmos and they're clever. Simple. I keep stressing simplicity here because it's important for domain names. Not only does it make it easier for the humans to find you, but for the SEO reasons already discussed, it helps the bots associate your brand with positive SEO signaling. Again, doing SEO these days means pleasing both parties, making happy humans and happy robots. The human users, your potential customers, need your brand to be be pleasant sounding, easily memorable to garner brand recognition, and be easy to spell, say, and type. And the bots, Google, they're looking for things like navigational brand searches. Are a lot of people in the world Googling your brand name? If Google sees people actively seeking out your website, then your website probably has value. And return visitors are the same people repeatedly Googling your brand throughout the week. Websites that have a lot of people continually coming back to them probably have something of value there. And satisfied clicks. When people click on your brand, do they stay on your webpage? Or do they press their back button and come right back to Google? If people are staying on your website for long periods of time, that means they probably found what they're looking for there. Again, all of these signals convey to Google that your website has value. So I hope it's clear that this isn't your typical SEO class. I'm trying to emphasize the importance of taking a holistic approach to SEO, the importance of understanding the behavior of both the robots and the humans. When you do SEO these days, it's best to understand both. And if you know how to harmonize both these skill sets, that's an invaluable asset to have, and that's what we'll be talking about in the upcoming class.